which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Heather, would you please take roll?
Councilmember Bachman.
Here.
Councilmember Beaton.
Here.
Councilmember Lundberg.
Here.
Mayor Sullivan.
Here.
Councilmember Pratt.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Grabowski.
Here.
Councilmember Martin Pontiac.
Here.
City Manager.
Here.
City Attorney.
Here.
DPW Director.
Here.
Finance Director.
Here.
Police Chief.
Here.
Fire Chief.
Here.
City Engineer.
Here.
Roll call complete.
Thank you. Public hearings, we have none. Citizens' comments on agenda-related items. Buddy, we'll move on to the consent agenda. All items marked with an asterisk are on the consent agenda and considered by the city manager to be routine matters. Prior to approval, any member of council may have an item removed and taken up during the regular portion of the meeting. Items include approval of minutes, cash balances, revenue and expenses, notification regarding next study session, consideration of proclaiming April as Parkinson's Disease Awareness Month, consideration of a resolution of support for the Great Lakes Environmental Festival, consideration of 2023 Memorial Day Parade, consideration of Combat Veterans Motorcycle Association Bike Night on July 7th, 2023, consideration of Manistee World of Arts and Crafts during the Manistee Forest Festival, July 1st and 2nd, 2023. At this time, council could take action to approve the consent agenda as presented. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Other, sorry.
I don't know if this is the time to talk about it, but the Parkinson's disease awareness, have they given us anything about what they're gonna do for that? I'm just curious. I haven't heard of that yet, and I don't know what they do for it.
Let's see. Okay. Yeah, so it involves a proclamation. I don't know if they tie any ribbons.
We do this every year for them. It's an annual thing that we do where we just proclaim April.
But is
And I don't
there anything
know.
publicly done, or an awareness, or they go to schools, I don't know. Whoever puts it on.
I don't believe so. I'm not sure. I think they just do, it says Michigan has for over 20 years established programs through a largely volunteer effort to provide education and support for people with Parkinson's disease, their families, and healthcare professionals. And I think this is just the month that they,
So it may be at some,
I think they do it all year round, the education, but this is the month that they proclaim as Parkinson's Awareness
I can
Month.
reach out to the person who contacted us, see if there's anything special that they
I
can.
was just curious. I
Yeah.
thought it'd be nice to know what they do. That's all. Thank you.
Heather, would you please take roll?
Councilmember Bachman.
Yes.
Councilmember Beaton.
Yes.
Councilmember Lundberg.
Yes.
Mayor Sullivan.
Yes.
Councilmember Pratt.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Grabowski.
Yes.
Councilmember Martin Pontiac. Yes. Motion approved.
Thank you. Unfinished business, we have new business, consideration of compensation commission recommendation for council salaries. Under the established procedures, the council may not develop compensation rates even though the rates do not become effective during the term of the city council. Rates are developed by an independent compensation commission which only meets once every other year. The council may accept or reject the compensation commission's recommendations. They may not be modified. Rejection can only occur if a 2/3 majority of council, 5 members, vote to reject the recommendations. If the recommendations are accepted, they will be implemented at the beginning of the year 2025. If no action is taken, the determination of the Compensation Commission shall be effective 30 days following the filing of its determination with the city clerk April 20th, 2023 pursuant to MCLL 117-.5C. The current salaries for the mayor and the city council are $4,774 and $3,713 per year respectively. These rates have not been in effect or have been in effect since January 2009. The Compensation Commission recognizes the importance of city council and acknowledges the commitment required of its members. Therefore, the Compensation Commission is recommending that these amounts be increased to $6,802.07 and $52.90 based on the compounding inflation from 2009 to 2023. At this time, council could take action to accept or reject the Compensation Commission's recommendation to increase the salaries for the mayor and the city council. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
To accept or reject? It's a motion to accept or reject.
Doing your motion for.
Okay.
To accept it?
I was seconding it to accept, so.
Okay.
Any discussion?
I just want to say we've had this come before and it's been turned down. I get disappointed in that sometimes because just this year we did a lot of work to take care of staff. We took care of the fire department and the police department. This job is not without work. It's not for us, it's for 2025. I don't think it's unreasonable to take care of city council as well as we take care of staff. And I personally intend to vote for it, to accept their recommendation, although I don't expect to be here when that goes into effect. I think I'll be living still, but I don't expect I'll be in this chair. My thoughts.
I've been through this process twice, and I've always felt uncomfortable with it. I feel like I'm giving a raise to myself in some respect, and or people that I don't know coming forward. So I've always thought that it should be placed on the ballot, so I'm not really sure why we have to approve these increases. I'm just uncomfortable with it.
I agree with that. I feel a little bit uncomfortable with it. I don't sit in this position for the money. I sit in this position because I want to give back to my community. And I would give back to my community if I didn't get paid. It's nice that we do, but I don't feel like I want to be the one in the position to make that call, so it's a little bit awkward.
If I may, I am the staff liaison for the Compensation Commission. The chair wanted to be here this evening, and she had intended to be here, but she had to be out of town for work and then got back late. So the commission met for a longer period of time this last meeting than they typically do. They had a very long, lengthy discussion about this, and they truly acknowledge all the time that is committed to serve on council. And it is, when you are approving this, you are approving for the next council. So it's not, this is not for today. This is for 2025. And it has not been increased. The last council to vote on this was in 2007. So, just take that into consideration. They really do acknowledge the efforts that you give and that the amount of time that you give to this community. And so it was really a good meeting to be a part of and to listen to each and every one of them and how they felt so strongly about it.
Anybody else? Heather, would you please take roll?
Oh, and the other thing is if we don't have 2/3 that rejects, if you choose to either reject or accept, it does go into effect within 30 days. So, okay, ready for roll call?
Could we repeat the motion? The actual motion?
The
that was
actual
made?
motion was a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Grabowski, second by Councilmember Pratt, to accept the Compensation Commission's recommendation to increase the salaries for the mayor and city council.
Okay, just wanted to be clear.
Okay, Councilmember Bachmann,
Yes?
Councilmember Beaton,
No?
Councilmember Lundberg,
No,
Mayor Sullivan,
Yes.
Councilmember Pratt,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Grabowski,
Yes.
Councilmember Martin Pontiac.
no.
Okay, so we have a 4-3.
Motion passed.
So motion, don't I have to, it's rejection.
rejection.
Okay, so motion passed. It has to be a 5-3 for the rejection.
Correct.
Okay,
All right, good.
we're good.
Consideration of a development and reimbursement agreement for the River Street Hotel LLC redevelopment project. At the January 17th, 2023 City Council meeting, City Council approved a brownfield plan for the River Street Hotel LLC redevelopment project at 348 River Street as part of a approval process for the project. A development and reimbursement agreement between the city developer and Brownfield Redevelopment Authority also needed to be approved. The Brownfield Redevelopment Authority and developer have approved the agreement. At this time, council could take action to enter into a development and reimbursement agreement with River Street Hotel LLC and the City of Manistee Redevelopment Authority, and further authorize the mayor and city clerk to execute this agreement. Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Second. Sorry.
Second.
Any discussion? Heather, would you please take roll?
Councilmember Bachmann.
Yes.
Councilmember Beaton.
Yes.
Councilmember Lundberg.
Yes.
Mayor Sullivan.
Yes.
Councilmember Pratt.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Grabowski.
Yes.
Councilmember Martin Pontiac.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. Consideration of agreement with Fishbeck for EDA Riverwalk Grant Engineering and Design Services. The city issued a request for proposals for engineering and design services for the EDA Riverwalk Grant project. The city received one bid from Fishbeck, which was slightly above the $120,000 estimate at $127,200. The Riverwalk RFP committee recommends awarding Fishbeck the contract contingent on a final approval from the city attorney. At this time, council could take action to enter into a contract with Fishbeck for the engineering and design services for the EDA Riverwalk Grant and authorize the mayor and city clerk to execute the agreements amendment number 1. I'm sorry, agreement and amendment number 1. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Any discussion?
I think the Fishback study did an excellent job in making their presentation to the Riverwalk group. It was very thoughtful. I appreciated it.
Yeah, I agree. I think they were very enthusiastic, and I'm excited to work with them on this.
Yes. Heather, would you please take roll?
Councilmember Bachmann.
Yes.
Councilmember Beaton.
Yes.
Councilmember Lundberg.
Yes.
Mayor Sullivan.
Yes.
Councilmember Pratt.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Grabowski.
Yes.
Councilmember Martin Pontiac.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. Consideration of the purchase of a single axle plow truck. The city of Manistee has received quotes from MI Deal vendors for the purchase of a single axle plow truck to replace a 2006 truck. D&K Trucking Company has quoted $130,721 for the cab and chassis. Truck and Trailer Specialties has quoted $98,116 for the equipment package and outfitting. The total purchase price is $228,837. At this time, council could take action to approve the quotes from D&K Trucking Company and Truck and Trailer Specialties for the purchase of a single axle plow truck. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second. Any discussion?
Jeff, it seems like a lot of money for one little truck.
It certainly is a lot of money, but this particular truck is one of the 4 main plow trucks that actually plow the streets. That's what it's used for. So this is consistent with all the other trucks that we've purchased. And one of the things that's very interesting is those trucks get used primarily 4 or 5 months out of the year, but when they're being used for 8 to 10 hours at a time, and those engines are going full force, wide open, and working hard. So,
Those are the big ones we see plowing the streets.
yes,
What's the ages of the other 3?
the other.
You said there was 4.
We replaced one 2 or 3 years ago, and then the other 2, I don't remember the exact. They're almost the same age as the one that we're replacing, which I think was a 2006. So they're all about in that 18, 19-year age.
So you're gonna eventually need one next year and one the following year then?
Yeah,
they're all-
the way that we plan this out, we've got 10 of those plow trucks, the big dump trucks. So they're recommended, the ones that are plowing on a daily basis during the wintertime, all the equipment manufacturers recommend those get replaced on about a 15, 16-year cycle, because that's when you start having problems with the transmission, engines, and chassis. just simple math, if we did one truck replacement every 2 years, and we have 10 trucks, that's a 20-year cycle. So we pretty much got this on a 20-year cycle, and trying to get the trucks to last that extra couple years.
Just the only two companies that bid in, one on the truck or the chassis and the other one on all the equipment.
I didn't
Is
understand.
there any other truck companies that bid in on this stuff?
There are, but these, the the Western Stars they're the truck that we've been purchasing for probably the last 6 years. After we're purchasing this off of My Deal. So, so the Western Star has the My Deal contract with the state of Michigan. The previous company that had it was International. We bought 3 trucks off 3 of those Internationals. We've had problems right along with those because their emission equipment package wasn't fully developed. And they actually canceled their own engine, and purchased Cummins engines. When the state switched the contract to Western Star, we actually went to the factory and I sent some guys there to get educated on it, do research, and we've done a lot of work on those. And since we've been purchasing those, we haven't had any of the type of issues that we've had on the Internationals. The problem is that because they're such good trucks, the demand is tremendous on them. So when we talked to the representative in October, November, they've already are filling the slots for the entire next production year. And that demand, along with all the material increases, has driven that unit up quite a bit. The equipment, we have been dealing with Truck and Trailer Specialties for well past my tenure at the city. And they also hold the My Deal contract for the equipment. They pretty much use Monroe snow control equipment, which is made in Wisconsin. And it's been very good and very reliable for us. So that's held pretty flat since the last purchase that we made.
And this is coming out of this year's budget, yeah?
It's actually would come out of next year's budget. When D&K knew that we were going to try to budget for one, they put in a slot for the city of Manistee without a commitment. So if you don't approve this tonight, they'll be able to take that slot and give it to some other community that's on the waiting list. If you approve it, then we'll be able to lock in that purchase, and when that gets in the production line, I believe it's for late summer, then they'll deliver the cabin chassis. Once the cabin chassis is delivered, we take it up to the equipment outfitter, then they order all that equipment. They expect that they'll have that built and back to us by the end of the year. So it actually will roll into next year's budget, so the money we've got budgeted just moves forward and is
Okay.
proposed in the upcoming budget as well.
Okay, thank you.
Did we budget a truck for last year's budget for this year?
Yeah,
What was that?
no. We budgeted one 2 years ago, but we took delivery of it this year.
Okay. Just trying to, I feel like we're always buying
it's-
trucks, I'm trying to remember.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's really hard because these large, I mean, these are custom-made trucks, so they take up to a year and a half. During COVID, it was almost 1 3/4 years before we would receive one. So it's hard to budget for one, order one, and then it's almost a 2-year process before you get them sometimes.
So what will be the impact if we don't vote for this tonight, since you said you use it for?
I can't tell you a factual impact, but what we would expect is that the current truck would receive more downtime, more repair time. Jeremy, our mechanic, does a phenomenal job maintaining those things and keeping them on the road. But when they get to this age, they start losing power, and then they start breaking down quite often.
There's no way we can get a 2023? I know this is 2024.
No,
It wouldn't be any cheaper or anything.
no.
Okay. Anybody else? Heather, would you please take roll?
Councilmember Bachman.
Yes.
Councilmember Beaton.
Yes.
Councilmember Lundberg.
Yes.
Mayor Sullivan.
Yes.
Councilmember Pratt.
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Grabowski.
Yes, if we have to.
Councilmember Martin Pontiac.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. Introduction of fiscal year 2023-2024 budgets. Administration has prepared the proposed 2023-2024 fiscal year budget. Finance Director will give a brief introduction to the city manager's budget recommendations to City Council and the community. Public hearing. These budget recommendations and receive public input on them has been scheduled for Tuesday, April 18th. Various study sessions have been established at a regular study session Tuesday, April 11th, and an optional work session on Tuesday, April 25th. No action is required on this item.
Good evening, Council. Tonight, we're going to give you a little overview of the budget document. You got it delivered to you tonight. It'll be out on the website for the staff or for the public to take a look at, and we'll have the normal budget process. I'm not sure why this is doing all this, excuse me, that we normally have. So, Bill, I don't know if you have any comments on the budget right now?
So, yeah, so Ed's going to give an overview, and then if council have a chance to digest this, if you could send any questions before the meeting on Tuesday, we'll do our best to get all that information together for you, and we look forward to working with you to pass this budget. So thank you.
Okay, the first slide we have here is just kind of some citywide budget highlights. The total budget this year for all funds is about $22 million. That's a decrease of about 1.7 from last year, and it really relates to our capital projects, which are funded by the bonds. Some of those are finishing up, and so there's just less dollars. If you take a look at the pie charts on the slide, you can see that the general fund is the biggest piece of the budget at about 37%. Then you've got the sewer fund that comes in at about 17, water fund at about 10%, and et cetera. So the general fund truly is where most of the services are provided, so it's not any surprise that that's the biggest amount in the budget. And then if you look at the type of expense, almost 75% of our budget is operating expense. Citywide budget highlights continued. Our assessed value this year increased by about $38.7 million, which is by far the biggest one that we've had in the last probably 20 years, even dating back to the Harbor Village days. And it's just a reflection of the market. The market has gone up tremendously. The result of that, plus the high inflation, was that we had a taxable value increase of about $17.5 million, or 8%. This year, though, we do not have a Headley rollback, which is a welcome change. The last 2 years, we've had Headley rollbacks both the year, which has reduced our operating millage by over a half a mil. So it's nice that we don't have that this year. The budget proposes a 2.25% water rate increase and a 7% sewer increase. The combined impact of those is the 3.5% that we've had for about the last decade. And it also proposes a 2.9% refuse rate increase.
Those are backwards, water and sewer.
I'm sorry, those are backwards. Thanks for pointing that out, Jeff. It's a 7% water increase and a 2.25% sewer increase. 2.9% refuse rate increase. We fund about $4.8 million in capital projects this year, including the EDA Riverwalk grant, which you approved the engineering agreement on earlier, and then we're going to reapply for the North Riverwalk grant. Key budget and future issues. In the budget document, there's a section called issue pages, and these are the 6 items that are featured on those pages. You can read more about it in the budget, but there's discussion about the aerial ladder truck and pumper. It lays out a plan, talks about the employees that are proposed, which we'll talk about in a little bit, PFAS contamination, and some other topics as well. And this presentation is going through in a similar fashion as the budget is laid out, so it goes page by page. It's kind of in the same order. Now we move on to the general fund itself. Key points there. Our budget is balanced outside of the use of ARPA funds. So we have about 7.7 million in revenue and about 8.2 million in expense. However, the budget does allocate 500,000 and change of the ARPA funds to fully obligate those. It does transfer $70,000 to the refuse fund for PFAS. That was able to be contained within the budget. It didn't take from fund balance. And the budget does propose to add 3.5 full-time equivalent employees in the general fund.
Could you elaborate on where the 3.5 full-time
We'll
employees would be?
get to that, yep. General fund revenue of about $7.7 million. Revenue was up sharply this year, so that is one of the benefits of the inflation. This is the first year that the state of Michigan proposal A rate was at 5%, which is the maximum. So proposal A says that your taxable value can rise at the rate of inflation or 5%, whichever is less. Or whichever is less. And so 5% was the rate. The actual inflation rate was almost 8%. And because of that 8% inflation rate, the actual, that's what's included in the Headley rollback formula, and that's pretty much what prevented us from having a Headley rollback. We also had very strong property sales and a lot of uncapping, so that also helps with the taxable value. So our tax revenue overall is up about 6.4%, but the actual taxable value went up about almost 8%. Our state revenue for revenue sharing is up slightly, so that's also a positive thing, and we'll get into some more slides on that. This chart really tells a tale. It goes all the way back to 1997 with our taxable and assessed value. And you can see that first section from about 1998 to 2007 with that first blue upward sloping arrow is really when Harbor Village was getting built out. Harbor Village single-handedly saved the city of Manistee with its tax base. It created an incredible amount of tax base when it went in. Then you can see the Great Recession hit in 2008, and you can see it took almost 10 years for that to start recovering. That was a very significant decrease. The way the state funds municipalities with property taxes, it takes a very long time to recover. And then you can see just recently, since about 2018, the taxable value has started to climb back up. The assessed value is growing at a faster pace than the taxable value, which is good in the sense that people's property values are rising and it doesn't impact their property taxes. And it's also good from the fact that as future inflationary increases happen on your property taxes, you'll be below that cap, so you'll be able to actually have those. You won't get uncapped. But I just think that's an interesting table. We always want to talk about state shared revenue. The chart on the left shows our revenue going back a number of years. We peaked at just under $1 million back in 2001, 2002, I think it was, maybe even 1999. And you can see when we had the tech crash in 2000 and the decade-long recession, basically, in Michigan with the auto industry, the state legislature balanced their budget on the backs of the local units of government by cutting revenue sharing tremendously. You can see since about 2012, it started to go back up. But if you look at the right side, the reason it's gone back up primarily is because of constitutional revenue sharing. That's the piece of the formula that the legislature and the governor can't touch. It's in the Constitution. The statutory revenue sharing, or what they call Economic Vitality Incentive Program funding, went down tremendously and has gone up some, but is still fairly flat. So even though we're starting to recover there, it's still not back where it was. And our total loss of revenue since its peak, if you added, if we had just maintained that peak and it had been flat, is over $6 million in that time period. Quickly looking at the ARPA recommendations. So we've proposed in the budget to spend the remaining unrestricted ARPA dollars. You might recall the federal government allowed us and most small local units of government to take that revenue and basically turn it into unrestricted. It was, the grant was for revenue replacement is what they called. And then that frees up those dollars to be used for whatever city council deems appropriate. So in last year's budget, we used about $120,000 of it for funding of a housing coordinator position, automated signage and beach warning system, new signs for wayfinding, but primarily for city entrance signs on both sides of town on 31, and then some money towards an amphitheater feasibility study. The proposed budget spends $502,000, which is the remaining, pretty much the remaining amount of that money. Year 2 of 3 for the Housing North position, $200,000 for 8th Street light rehab. We'll talk more about that when we get into the streets, but that's a preventive maintenance technique that will help to stretch our street dollars out as opposed to a reconstruction project. $125,000 and change for the beach loop reconstruction, and that's going to help to make that project as good as it can be, including adding quite a few parking spots down there. We've got a grant match for the Veterans Park North Riverwalk. That will match the dollars that we still have setting from the capital improvement bond back in 2020. As you recall, we've applied for that grant a number of times and we haven't received it, so we're hopeful this year will be the charm. We had to increase our grant match, so that's a little bit higher than what it was last year. And then finally, the last $20,000 would be the third year of the Housing North in fiscal year 25. So that is what's proposed in the budget. That allocates all of the ARPA revenue. General fund expenses, about $8.2 million as we talked. About 43% of that is wages, 33% operations, a little bit in debt. And then on the expenses by area, you can see DPW and parks combined is about 28%, police about 19%, and fire about 17%. Those are by far the 3 biggest pieces of the general fund budget. And all this information is also in the budget document. Just some highlights for the general fund. There's a lot of different departments in here, but I wanted to kind of point out the key areas. There's money in there for a statistically valid citizen survey. It's been a number of years since we've done that, and if that's something that council wants to proceed with, then we'll go through that process. And it's quite an endeavor because you have to figure out what questions you want, what areas you want to look at. You have to get a contractor on board to do it, but it really doesn't do any good to do a survey unless it's statistically valid, and that costs money. The 3 FTEs that Councilmember Beaton mentioned and that are included in the budget would be 1 additional full-time firefighter and paramedic. That would put the firefighting staffing back to what it was before Mark Cameron took the fire chief job after Tim Colesel left. When Chief Cameron got promoted, the union agreed to allow him to fill some shifts, and we did not fill that position. But this would take it back to that staffing level where it was and the long-time staffing level that they've had traditionally. It funds 1 additional full-time parks employee, which was, I think, a recommendation from the Parks Commission, which council seemed to be in favor of. It proposes to eliminate the contract with the county for the planning and zoning and bring that position back in-house like it used to be up until 5 years ago. And it funds 1 part-time facility assistant here at City Hall. If you look at the chart to the right, you can see the employee trend in the last 20 years. And it goes down from a peak of 65 in 2004 to 54.5 in 2012. The very steep part there from 2008 to 2012 was directly in response to the Great Recession, where we just didn't have the revenues and we downsized and outsourced. Then that staffing has stayed fairly stable over the next decade. Because we just didn't have the revenue to kind of bring back some of those positions. This is the first year we've really had the revenue and the ability to do that. So even though it seems like a large increase, and it is on a percentage basis, it really brings us back up to more of a standard location. There's no intention to bring that staffing all the way back up to 65, but it puts us in a spot kind of where we've been traditionally. There's $10,000 allocated for a potential CEDM fellow. You might remember when Lizette Reyes was here when we did Project Rising Tide. Because we're a redevelopment ready community, we're allowed to tap into that program from time to time, and so that's what that could potentially fund. There's money to rewrite the master plan. New line item, there's about $13,000 to help support volunteers with their efforts. There's $33,000 for a Riverwalk Asset Management Plan. The general fund budget funds all requested appropriations from the different organizations, and the motor pool contributions continue to increase per the long-term plan for the motor pool. You might recall we invested some general fund reserves in that over the last 3 years, and this is necessary to continue to try to stabilize the motor pool. Water and sewer utilities. Proposed, and I got this backwards again, sorry about that. The proposed rate increase is 2.25% for sewer and 7% for water, which again is the 3.5% combined that we've had in the past. That was presented by Stantec, who did the rate sufficiency analysis that was funded as part of the drinking water asset management process. That actually was required as part of that plan. We tried to make it so that the impact on the citizens was similar to what they're used to. The ordinance does require an inflationary increase, so we think this is a good plan moving forward and funds most of our needs. The increase is the same, pretty much the same as it was last year, about $3.30 per month, or $39.55 per year. And keep in mind, that's for our typical 6,000 gallon per month customer. We've always used that in the budget since I started with the city. That's kind of been the placeholder, the typical customer. In reality, our typical customer uses between 400 and 4,500 gallons a month. So it's not, the impact isn't quite as big as what that shows, but that's to be consistent from year to year. That's the number we've used. The budget also includes a suggested water escrow deposit to be increased from $300 to $400. It hasn't been done in a number of years. They were researching when it was, but I believe it was when Heather was doing utility billing, so that's been quite a while, and we've had rate increases year over year. What the water escrow deposit is for briefly is if I have a landlord who wants the water in the tenant's name, they have to fill out one of these affidavits that provides the landlord protection and puts some of the burden on the city if those bills get bigger than that amount. But it does need to be raised periodically. It's difficult to do it on an inflationary basis year over year because it creates a ton of paperwork, so we try to just do this periodically. And we've had a number of times where these bills and bills in arrears are getting up over that $300, and it does expose the city a little bit. Some key points on the water and sewer utility. Obviously, the Clean Water Recovery Facility certification, it's open, it's running. We have to prove to the state that it can do what it is designed to do. So that's ongoing. I believe there's going to be some kind of a ribbon cutting ceremony scheduled for this spring or early summer, which is a huge accomplishment for the city and for the community. Obviously ongoing lead and copper monitoring, that's still a big issue in the state. We're going to complete our DWAM grant and then continue with lead service line identification, inventory, and replacement. Those are going to be mandated by the state over a number of years. And then there's various capital projects in the budgets, including water main and sewer main work, updating our wireless infrastructure, some equipment, and a Vector sewer camera. Moving on to the marina, we have a gorgeous marina facility, a modern building, all brand new docks, probably some of the best docks in the state, a great location, right downtown, right on the Riverwalk. You'd think it would be just booming, but it's also halfway between Frankfurt and Ludington, and so people tend to skip over us at times. That's why we've struggled a little bit at the marina with our revenue and our dockage, but the Harbor Commission and the Marina Management is investing some money this year to try to do some more marketing proactively. I know they had some drone footage shot, and they're going to try to see if they can't attract some more boater traffic. We do also have an experienced marina manager who's got a year running our facility now, so she's more used to that. And so we're hoping to have a really good year at the marina this year. See what happens with that. Our boat launch, the rates remain the same at 50 and 10. Boat launching is pretty much self-sustaining, although it is vulnerable to weather conditions, fishing conditions in particular, and fuel prices. Even with all that, it's fairly resilient. The revenues are pretty stable year over year. In a few years, we'll probably replace the First Street auto attendant. Right now, it's still running fine. We are accumulating reserves to be able to leverage future grants, possibly to improve 9th Street boat launch, possibly to add a kayak launch at some point, and then at some point the large parking lot will need to be resurfaced, and the boat launch will probably shoulder some of that cost. Streets. Spicer Group presented the State of the Street report in early January. Some of this information is repeated in the budget, but it's worth going over here again. The condition of all streets as of the last time they were rated last fall shows 22% good, 28% fair, and 50% poor. That's all major and local streets that the city is responsible for. It doesn't include US 31. You can see since 2008, when we really started implementing asset management and using RoadSoft and managing the streets more scientifically per kind of state mandates and best practices, we really haven't moved the needle on overall road conditions. And we've invested millions and millions and millions of street dollars, millions and millions of general fund and capital improvement fund dollars, and tens of millions in sewer separation projects that rebuilt the streets above them. And that's what we've got to show for it. And that's not anybody's fault. That's just the reality that streets in Michigan are chronically underfunded. In fact, Manistee County as a whole, not just the city's actually doing fairly okay compared to some of its peers, but Manistee County has the overall worst roads in the entire state, just for what it's worth. That part of that is a funding issue. Part of it is our freeze-thaw cycles here along the lakeshore. One thing to keep in mind, the sewer separation projects are done, so we're not going to be rebuilding streets on the backs of sewer separation. We might be rebuilding some streets on the back of water main replacements. That's part of the reason we need to raise more money on the water side, less money on the sewer side moving forward. In the budget, the transportation improvement plan is presented. You can see the 4-year plan shows almost a 50-50 split between local and major streets. And you can see the amount of investment. It averages about $1.4 million in street dollars. That does not include any other dollars like water and sewer that are also contributing to the project. This is pretty typical that we've been able to afford over the past few years. This map shows the proposed street work that's also in your budget. Lucas did put US 31 on there. That's not going to be a city project, but it's going to be a significant project for the community. 31 is in terrible shape, as everybody knows. But we do have the other projects on here. One thing I want to point out, you can see 8th Street. I mentioned that earlier about doing a preventative maintenance, probably a slurry seal on that. You can see how the length of street that gets treated because of that. Some of these other projects that you have are reconstructs, and it might be a block or two, and this only costs $200,000 to do the preventative maintenance. So that's one of the asset management 101 principles that we talked about at the State of the Streets report. We've talked to council about. We haven't done one of those in a while, and 8th Street is a prime candidate for it. If we let that go too much further, it's going to be much more expensive to keep in good condition, and it gets a ton of traffic. So that is built into the capital improvement plan as well as the other streets that you see on there. Looking forward into the future a little bit. As I mentioned, we've made a significant investment in our streets. It's no different than any other communities, but yet we've barely moved the needle. The state has increased funding for Act 51 by probably not quite doubled it, but almost in the past 6, 7, 8 years. That increase in funding that they were phasing in is pretty much done now. We're going to be left with just the inflationary gas tax increases. And the last I saw in the state budget is, even though streets were a priority for the Whitmer administration at one point, they're really not much of a priority anymore, and there's likely not to be much movement at this point unless there's a deal made. So we're probably not going to be getting additional funding from the state at this point. Our conditions have actually declined a little bit as we've had to redeploy resources to match utility projects that needed to get done, so we haven't been able to do as much preventative maintenance, hence the project on 8th Street and my comment about needing to invest more in that. But the reality is there's not enough money to make meaningful progress that the community wants. And so the budget talks about two options. We've talked about this for a number of years, and it was also talked about by the Street Ad Hoc Committee when they did their report. And there's a couple of ways to make a bigger splash on the roads. It costs money. One of them would be to do a voted bond issue and identify a subset of streets for some projects to be done over 3 years. So you can make a big impact, but then you're paying for that over 20 years. But that would be a voted bond, and because it's a voted bond, it would be a millage increase. Or you could do a Headley override, which would restore our operating millage from the 17.244 that it's been rolled back up to 18 mils potentially, which would raise a lot of money on an annual basis to put towards streets. So you could do several projects a year because of that. The chart on the right is one that Spicer put together, and you can see that the reconstruction, if you were to do all the streets in the city that were Pacer 1 and 2, would cost $70 million. That's the type of treatment that's necessary for Pacer 1 and 2 streets, whereas anything that's Pacer 3 to 8, the total cost to fix those is only $6.4 million. So we've got a big lift because we have a lot of streets that require reconstruction, and that's the challenge that communities have all over the state. It's not just Manistee. Moving on to refuse, rate increase is proposed to be 2.9%, so a tidy tote, as an example, would go from $17 to $17.50. We adjust rates annually to offset our contracted increases with Republic Services and other service cost increases. One thing to keep in mind on the refuse fund is that the PFAS contamination poses significant and unknown risks at this time, and there will be more costs coming for PFAS this year, the year after that, the year after that. We just don't know what they are. We're doing the investigatory work right now to try to quantify that a little bit better and then work with the state to figure out what that plan is going to be. It may be, depending on what happens and the timing, that we might need to supplement the refuse fund with more general fund reserves. Last year, council did not want to raise the millage to pay for that. This year, because of the revenue increases we've had in the general fund, we were able to transfer $70,000 that did not invade fund balance to the refuse fund from the general fund to help pay for some of those PFAS expenses. We may not have that luxury in the future without invading the general fund reserves. The budget does fund some new trash receptacles, and there's money in there to possibly get a demo of a leaf vacuum to see if that makes any difference in our leaf pickup process. Moving on to the capital improvement fund, this is funded by revenue via the spending rule from the oil and gas fund. The charts there show kind of the categories of the spending. It's pretty well distributed between streets, buildings, marina, parks, and equipment. We have prior commitments that total about $243,000. There's an $80,000 current allocation to local streets. We've had that for a number of years, again, trying to bolster our street funding. And then we've got current projects of about $222,000. You can see the lower chart there, the types of spending, and this again is all in the budget, but there's about $220,000 of new, there's $140,000 of recurring, and then about $182,000 of debt that's being serviced out of the capital improvement fund. Some of the projects that are proposed, new projects are some carryover projects, the Ramsdale Pillars and wireless network carryover just because the project's not going to get done this fiscal year. There's Memorial Park parking lot seal coating, Fifth Avenue Beach parking lot and wall improvements, surveillance camera upgrades at some of our facilities, money to remove the Sands Park tennis court potentially, $15,000 to do a full evaluation of City Hall mortar and tuck pointing. You may have noticed when you came in today the steps are failing. That's a different issue that we hopefully can fix, but there's a lot of, it's an old building, it needs to be evaluated. So that starts that funding process, and then after we get that, we'd be able to bid that work out probably in a future budget year. So those are the projects that are in the capital improvement fund. The motor pool has about $450,000 of budgeted cost in the budget, and that's a total of about $625,000 worth of equipment. The reason those numbers are different is we do finance equipment over time, so that financing isn't all in the current fiscal year. There's a number of projects because of the supply chain issues and long lead times that have been delayed and pushed into this year. You can see there's some pickup trucks, plow truck, police car, some mowers, that sort of thing. So this is all laid out in the 10-year motor pool plan that gets revised continually depending on needs and tries to forecast out what the equipment needs are going to be. Oil and gas fund. You know, obviously we're blessed to have that. It's great for future generations. It's great to fund current capital projects. The portfolio has gone down quite a bit with the stock market decline, but again, because of how we manage that, it hasn't had a negative impact on our spending yet, and probably won't. Also, we have a lot more money in that fund than we have the amount that's protected. So the 3.5% spending rule for this year generates about $433,000, which is the highest amount yet since we've been managing it that way. Our compounded annual return for the better part of 15 years has been 7.7%. That was up to 9.9 before the latest market downturn. And then you can see oil and gas royalties. Just on a positive note, we finally got all the royalties and arrears from Hound Resources. Those came in last month. And so that we should be getting those regularly now, and that was probably close to $75,000. So those were ones that we should have gotten in late 21 and 22 that we just received now. So it's glad that we were able to get those in. Downtown Development Authority budget is also included in the budget because City Council has to approve it. We started doing that 2 or 3 years ago just to make the process be on the same timeline. Their budget, and they'll speak to that more fully to you, but I just wanted to highlight it, spends about $255,000 of their fund balance, including paying all of the $160,000 for the West Shore Community College Plaza commitment that they had. One thing I do need to point out is that their proposed budget eliminates the $70,000 maintenance agreement with the city in order to fund more facade grants, decorations, and DDA design projects. The city's general fund budget includes that $70,000, so that's going to have to be a discussion point. And we do have a contract with the DDA that requires 180 days notice if they want to get out of it, which they did not give. The DDA budget also eliminates hops and props, and they've basically zeroed out all the event revenue in their budget. The boats aren't able to make it this year, and they decided it wasn't worth having, and they're not doing any other projects. You can see on the DDA, just as an aside, of all of their revenue, city is about 62%, and the rest is the other local units of government. Finally, just kind of looking at the budget path moving forward, we introduced the budget tonight just to get council kind of a high-level overview. You've got the budget document, you can review it. The real discussion starts on next Tuesday. We'll have a budget discussion after the regular council meeting. Then on the 18th, we'll have a public hearing and more budget discussion. We've got an optional budget discussion on the 25th and then budget adoption on May 2nd. So thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. Okay, citizens' comments. This is an opportunity for citizens in attendance to comment on municipal services, activities, or areas of city involvement. Limit to 5 minutes. Letters submitted to council will not be publicly read.
My name's Dennis Skira. I live at 1453 Maple Road. I have a three-part question or a multi-part question concerning the Waterworks building on First Street. Does the city own that property?
Yes.
We do.
Yes, okay. Last year, a roof was put on that building. Does anyone have a figure as to how much that cost?
I don't recall.
Pardon?
We can get you the number.
Okay. Anyways, in case you haven't driven by it, all four gable ends, the fascia is completely dislodged. So that tells me one of two things. Either if they replaced it, the fascia at the time the roof was put on, then it was a poor job. If they didn't replace it, then they should have used a commercial drip edge instead of the cheaper residential, which only gives you about an inch drop. Because if the fascia does not fit well into the drip edge, you end up with what we have there. And based on the last couple weeks of foul weather, I suspect that there's plenty of water, and one thing got down inside of that. And quite honestly, the only fascia that isn't dislodged is at the lower end where the gutter is, and I suspect that is not properly under the drip edge also. So somebody needs to be assigned the task of protecting our tax dollars, because I assume we're talking probably around 40 grand went in that thing and the job is botched. So Ed will get me the figure, and I guess Was the council aware of that, or has anyone attempted to contact the contractor to make those repairs?
No, but we'll get you the answers and get back to you.
And
Yeah, just we have reached out to the contractor.
Perfect.
That's probably a good So
was
we're getting ready for it.
was the drip edge replaced or not the drip edge, but the fascia?
It was.
So they either undercut it or they,
You hit it right in the head, I think. You know,
Sorry?
You hit it right in the head, I think there's a little light on getting.
yeah, they used short change. Let's just say they shortchanged the job. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I got to say.
Good evening, Council. My name is Shirley Madden, and I am here representing the Great Lakes Environmental Festival. And you may wonder, well, what is the Great Lakes Environmental Festival? So I would like for you to envision the streets of Manistee filled with people. And you say, well, what's going on? Well, they've heard about the Great Lakes Environmental Festival. And the Environmental Festival is going to provide information about all of the environmental issues, from climate change to our air to the water, and people are searching for ways where they can get information. And the Great Lakes Environmental Festival is providing information. This is our second year. The last year, our first year, we were at the Vogue Theater showing a film that one of our members put together. And we invited the high school students to come in to see that. So we are involved with the whole community, working with students, speakers, and the facilities. This year, our second year, we are having speakers at West Shore Community College, and also we have an expo at the Wagoner Center. So we are using our community to help bring about our Great Lakes Environmental Festival. Now, we have speakers, and I just wanted to give you some information. And let me first tell you the date, because this is all part of Earth Day. April the 21st, 22nd, and also the 23rd. So we are excited about this event. We're excited about the people who are coming. Just to give you an idea, we have Julia Chambers, who will come and speak on environmental activities. We have Mark Miller. Can I get this? He's going to speak about sustainable tourism. Okay, yes. And we have Frank Beaver, who's with the Little River Band of Ottawa Indians, who's going to talk about the wild rice restoration project. Just to give you names of a few, we have Alan O'Shea, who's going to talk about renewable energy. And, you know, we don't leave children out. We have a film on Saturday at the Vogue, and it's about the environment. I forget the name, but we have a film there scheduled for the children, 10 o'clock Saturday. And we also have opened this up to our high school students. They have made videos of what they feel would be some information about the environment. So we will have their videos. We have film that will be presented. We have children's activities. I don't even want to tell you what the activities are, but it's fun-filled activities for our children. So this is, and then the parents will also receive information about the Earth Day and what they can do for our renewable energy and how they can live in a more sustainable environment. So we are excited about this. We've asked for a resolution that the city would help support us, and that's the Great Lakes Environmental Festival, as we do this annually. So that's why we're asking you to give us a resolution to support our activities here. You are going to see the city of Manistee filled with people, and you ask them, well, why? What's going on? They say the Great Lakes Environmental Festival is taking place. So, did anyone else want to come? Okay. All right, thank you so much. Oh, and I do have flyers for all of you. Okay.
Thank you.
I'll give you those. Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Mr. Gamble?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to take a moment and thank Ed for his work, the budget, and all the department heads. We're very fortunate to have, working in other communities, the narrative provided in here, I think helps explain kind of where we're at with different issues, and appreciate Ed's time and all the department heads working on this budget, and look forward to working with council to adopt it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else, staff?
I just wanted to let you know that council petition packets are available for council districts 2, 4, and 6. The advertisement will be in the paper this week. It's posted on our website. So those are the districts that will be on the November general election as districts 2, 4, and 6.
Thank you. Lucas?
Two things. One, for the NRBC, I just wanted everybody to know that on May 4th, we're having a community service day at 3 o'clock, and we plan to restore all the sidewalks and some of the playground stuff at Casman Academy and around 9th Street there. And then secondly, if you haven't noticed, South Lake Shore Drive started construction today. So there's a lot of confusion right now, but traffic is supposed to come up to the fish cleaning station and then go through the parking lot and exit the new entrance across from the new hotel entrance. So just wanted to let everybody know that.
Thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Pratt?
I just had two things. So one of the questions I had was when we had talked about the ordinance regarding the water, it kind of come up that there was some oversight in regards to like part of the ordinance. So I'm just wondering, like, is there an ordinance review that we do annually with department heads or as a city to make sure everybody's aware of what that is? Like, I'm just kind of equating it to like what I do at my job. Like back to school, we kind of go over the basics with everybody. Like, do we do that with ordinances as people change positions or things like that?
I think as issues come up, but I don't think there hasn't been looking over all ordinances, but I know that would be time consuming, but that's something we can look at doing. But typically it's been kind of when an issue arises, and then if it's something we need to kind of modify or address.
Okay, I just thought maybe that would be one way to be preventative about some of the issues that occur, because there just seems to be a little bit of a disconnect sometimes. And then my only other concern was, again, kind of going back to communication. That was kind of brought up with like the bid process. It was kind of brought up with just some different things. It seems like sometimes we're not aware of things. I was appreciative that the Waterworks building came up. I noticed that this weekend, but then it seems like we were aware of that, but as a council, we weren't aware that there was a concern and that was being dealt with.
So, yeah, and that one, we were aware. I think we had the engineer. I try to be inclusive every week with the weekly update I provide council, and understood.
Browski?
Bill, do we have anything that we're working towards putting some money aside for that new fire truck that eventually we have to buy, besides waiting for a grant down the road?
So we did try to apply for that grant, as you mentioned, and we were able to get one of the last community, but it is very hard and it's tough to get that equipment. So we did have an issue page in the budget. I mentioned in the weekly update about, it looks like it would probably have to be a bond issue, or we'd have to, it's probably going to be, I think we look at, it's a 2-year cycle, I think, or 2-year, you order it and then it takes a while to get.
If you put in for an order, you can be right now with the times of trucks coming in, can take up to 3 to 4 years on ordering.
But I mean, we're not putting anything on the side, starting out.
Not at this time, no, and it's 2.4 million for the ladder truck and the pumper.
Okay.
Good. Ms. Pontiac?
I got nothing.
Mr. Bachman?
Well said, thank you.
Ms. Beaton?
Ed, thank you for the report. I just want to point out one thing, and it's probably only because I've been peeling apart layer by layer, looking at Act 51 over the past few months. It's not just the fuel that's included in that, it's also registration fees. That's part of that constitutional revenue that we get back. So I just thought I would point that out. And I was pleased to see when I was looking through everything that 49 million came back due to licensing with marijuana. That the state redistributed as well. That's not part of the constitutional revenue, but it was nice to see that that was also including going back to all the municipalities, et cetera. So thank you for that, but I did want to bring that up because I did actually pay for a 2-year license renewal on my car. So that stung a little bit. It was over $300, so it stuck in my mind. I wanted to mention it. Thanks.
Ms. Lundberg.
And on that, thank you so much for the work on the budget, and I look forward to working with you to get it passed.
We'll take a motion to adjourn.
Oh, closed session.
We have a closed session.
I'm sorry. Take a motion to go into closed session.
So we have to have a motion to adjourn to the closed session.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Councilmember Bachman.
Yes.
Councilmember Beaton.
Yes.
Councilmember Lundberg.
Yes.
Mayor Sullivan.
Yes.
Councilmember Pratt.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Grabowski.
What?
Councilmember Martin Pontiac.
Yes.
Motion approved. Hearing none.
Now I can take a motion to adjourn.
Hold on.
Oh,
I gotta start recording. Give it 1 second to start up. Okay, we are back in,
Look like a
we're
blind.
back in regular session. It's 8:38 and
take a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion.
Now can I